Homework RPG was created by Blade the Pie Eater, using RPG Maker VX Ace, and is probably the shortest RPG I've ever played, clocking it at under 3 minutes to beat. In fact, this review explaining the game's many issues will probably be longer than the game itself is. Story-wise, the game is very short and focuses on Braid doing his homework in the style of a turn-based RPG. And while this is meant to be funny, there just isn't enough content and setup in this game to make the joke work. As for ways to improve the story, I suggest lengthening the game by having Brady go through a day of school where you'll have to deal with minor in-class assignments, the frustrations of being saddled with difficult homework you'll have to do at home. It might also help to have a midday study hall where students are shown wielding giant pencils as spears or utilizing bows and quills as weapons to keep their homework in check. I guess my point in all this is that the game doesn't take the joke far enough to make it work. On the gameplay side of things, we have a rather simple turn-based RPG with rather uninspiring combat since none of the assignments feel like a legitimate challenge. In fact, most of the battles are so easy, you begin to wonder why the main character even dreads dealing with his homework, since all of his assignments come across as being all bark and no bite. To make matters worse, the game lacks a proper send-off. After you deal with all of Bray's assignments, you're instantly sent back to the title screen. As for ways to improve upon the game, I'd suggest ending the game with a proper boss battle with a take-home test, and adding in a victory screen showing Brady getting an A on his assignments, or at least adding something at the end to make you feel like you actually achieved something, rather than sending you back to the title like you haven't done anything at all. In terms of visuals and sounds, the game clearly utilizes the RTP, which means the game is highly average in both categories and leaves the player with nothing to really remember this game by when it comes to its presentation. It also means the game lacks any means of utilizing sight gags to induce laughter in the player, like having Brady walk home from school on sidewalks made of parchment that are just riddled with questions, or having a field of living textbooks next to the school that spew forth the assignments and writing topics found within their pages. This just goes back to the whole this game doesn't go far enough with its own concept again, and lacking any sort of visuals that go with it is another downside the game suffers from. Homework RPG is ultimately a failed attempt at a comedy game. While it has an interesting concept, it doesn't push it to the absurd limits it needs to make the joke work. Instead, it barely scratches the surface of the idea and leaves you with a game in need of serious improvements. I guess you could argue I'm being unfair since the game wasn't intended to be a masterpiece of creative flair, but I think the real heart of the joke in a game like this is to make a short game that covers all the basics of an RPG. As such, the joke lies in making the game feel like it wants the player to take it seriously, while still being completely ridiculous in terms of what is happening. As it currently stands, the game is just a series of 3 short battles that end with a sudden and unsatisfying conclusion. As for my recommendations on this game's worth, I suggest avoiding it until it undergoes a major overhaul.